Rules without relationship breeds rebellion. Remember these words as we talk today about setting boundaries, consequences, and your teen's independence. Rules without relationship breeds rebellion. If you came to our website, found this series, and decided that this is the fifth video, in the series is where you should start, you are wrong. Stop. Go back. Watch the other ones first. Good communication is critical to relationship building, and rules without relationship breeds rebellion. My name is Paul for Rock Solid Refuge. In crisis, start here. Okay. What was I saying before the title card? What was the big push here? Do you remember? I said it 3 times, right? Rules without relationship breeds rebellion. Remember it, memorize it, embroider it on a pillow. It is critical that as you are laying out the boundaries for your teens, that you are doing it in a way that creates relationship and doesn't hinder it. With all of this focus on relationship that I've been laying out for the past little bit, it may be easy to fall into the trap of thinking if what matters is relationship, then the rules don't matter. That's not true. We talked briefly in the first or second video about role modeling, relational influence, and authority. These are the 3 ways to guide young people. Most parents, especially in crisis, lean almost exclusively on authority. My house, my rules. For that reason, I really wanted to stress that relational piece. Rules aren't as simple as what I say goes. So first off, think about all the rules that exist in your house and the ones that you would like to exist in your house. They're not all equal, are they? What hill are you willing to die on? What does your kid do that drives you up the wall, and does it really matter? Do your rules create a feeling of security in your kid, or are they tyrannical? Do they have sound reasoning behind them? Do they matter? Some parents are very, we'll say, controlling about their environment. There's a right way and a wrong way for the house to be, and they'll get bent out of shape over, frankly, nothing at all. There's a proper way for the toilet paper to hang. Sure, and you're dragging your family into the bathroom and haranguing them over an improperly placed roll of toilet paper? Are you creating a crisis out of something trivial? And consider the power that you're giving over to your teen when that is the case. If they want to upset you, all they have to do is rotate the toilet paper? Now, of course, I'm using a frivolous example, but people get bent out of shape over frivolous things. We'll create trivial rules to manage our world, and the parent who gets upset over the toilet paper being the wrong way, it's a blind spot for them. They often have no clue that they're being unreasonable. Are you being unreasonable with some rule in your house? And how do you know? Well, the best way is first to talk to your partner about it, but talk to your teen too. Ask them what rules make no sense to you, and listen to them in the way that we've been talking about. Don't explain the rule to them. Thank them for telling you and let them know that you'll be thinking about it. And genuinely think about it. The parent in our toilet paper example, if they were told by their kid that's the way that they were being unreasonable, they could just respond with, well, there's a right way and a wrong way to do these things. I mean, I'd say they'd be technically right, but the relationship hasn't changed. Asking your kid what you're doing wrong is terrifying. You don't know what you're going to get back. There's a lot of ridiculous rules that I could get into, or I could tell you the rules that I think should be in place in your home, but I don't think either one of those things would be particularly useful, at least not in the long run. Instead, let's get a little philosophical if we could. Let's talk about what makes a rule good. What is the purpose of a rule? Have you considered that before? If you've watched all the other videos up till now, you'll probably be able to guess my answer. It's ultimately about relationship. Rules should be in place to create an environment in which relationships can occur, grow, and thrive. Of course, this breaks down into things like safety and security, things like respect and consideration for others, health and well-being, things like promoting future relational success. And there's crossover, there's give and take, there's recognizing reasonable limitations of rules. It's important that no rule exists for the sake of having a rule. The rule should exist for the sake of the relationship. Be home at a reasonable hour is a matter of ensuring safety. You have to go to bed at an appropriate time. Rest is important in ensuring everyone is able to engage mentally and be in relatively good spirits. We have dinners together on weekend nights, maybe fits into category of health or promoting future relational success. What about something like you have to go to school? Well, this falls into the category of well-being, doesn't it? Getting a high school diploma is a good thing. As a teenager, they may be more interested in pursuing skateboarding full-time. You, as a, presumably rational adult, understand the importance of getting them, or rather of setting them up for the greatest opportunity for success long-term. Only so many people get to be professional skateboarders. So maybe you'll foster and encourage that desire and that trajectory, but not at the expense of the more secure, safer route. It's no different than if there's a specific college or university that your teen really wants to get into. You encourage it, you help them achieve that goal, like we had talked about, but you make sure that they have a fallback plan because you have the well-being of your child at heart. There is a level of flexibility that we need to talk about here too, though. Rules shouldn't be flaunted, but your teen should be able to come to you with requests to essentially break or suspend these rules for a time. And you should genuinely consider it. It's easy to fall back on a rule, but you need to ask yourself, why am I saying no? Am I enforcing a rule just to enforce the rule, or is it because there's a genuine concern here? Ask them why an exception should be made, and take time to think about it. It's up to them to have a convincing argument, but it's up to you to be flexible enough to understand the balance between the rule and circumstances that would reasonably call for a suspension of that rule. Even something like you have to go to school. You may consider suspending that if there's a skateboard tournament in town that they have an opportunity to take part in. But Paul, his grades are bad. Okay, well, talk to him about it. Going back to the goal setting thing, you want to go to the skateboard park to do the skateboarding tournament, but your grades are bad. If I let you go to this, what sort of changes can we expect in your schooling? And then you go through the whole goal setting thing we had talked about in a previous video. How will we see tangible change? Do you see how this all fits together? If there's some other hang up, right, that maybe is not school related, say they haven't cleaned their room despite you having asked them to a few times, feel free to tie those things together. Absolutely, you can go to the tournament. Clean up your room and I'll call the school and let them know that you won't be in that day. Okay, the last 3 videos on communication were supposed to be a single video when I'd originally plotted all of this out. I don't want to do that again, so I am moving on to consequences now, all right? When a rule is broken, it's important to ask yourself, was this action immaturity or defiance? That's a pretty big distinction. Usually, immaturity can be dealt with through better boundaries, having clearly defined expectations. Things happen. Accidents are real. Defiance, on the other hand, needs to be met with consequence. And this consequence needs to be communicated when you are defining the rule. The consequence must be swift enough after the infraction that the consequence is easily connected mentally to the broken rule. You know, I broke this rule, so here is this consequence that I got. Still, make sure you're not reacting emotionally in your effort to be swift, in your effort to deliver a consequence quickly. It also needs to be short term. Your teen needs an opportunity to succeed or fail again. Having a long-term punishment creates resentment and actually distances the punishment from the infraction. It breaks that mental link between the two. That said, consequence does need to be strong enough to actually get the teen's attention, but this is why it's important to set the consequence at the same time as the rule. You want to be emotionally distant from the infraction. You don't want to be jumping in immediately after the rule is broken to make up a strong punishment while you're still in this emotional state. So, consequences must be swiftly enforced after the rule is broken, short term so your teen has another chance to succeed, and strong enough to get their attention. With all of these things then, it's important that you not threaten your teen with a consequence that you are unwilling or unable to enforce. Those sorts of empty empty threats damage relationships and leave all the other boundaries and all the other consequences in a sort of unsettled state. So sit down with your teen and ask them, here's the rule, right? Here's the principle at the heart of that rule. What do you think would be an appropriate consequence for breaking that rule? And again, guide that conversation. Some teens will say, no consequence. Well, you have to explain to them, it really doesn't work for you. And the two of you will have to come to a compromise, or you will be forced to set the consequence without their input. Then there are other teens who will, they'll overcorrect, who will give a consequence that is way too harsh for the infraction. I stayed out 15 minutes too late, a month without going to a friend's place. Reel them back in. Remember, they're probably going to be parents themselves one day and will have to understand what an appropriate consequence for actions are. This is a learning opportunity. And as you are considering consequences for your teen, keep in mind that the consequences should not actively hinder relationship. Okay, so what do I mean by that? Some families have one night a week where each kid has some one-on-one time with a parent, going to get ice cream or for a meal or maybe do a movie, something like that. If your child breaks a rule and you take away that one-on-one time, you are punishing them by removing relationship, right? You're essentially saying, if you are bad, you don't get to have a relationship with me. That's a twisted way to parent there, to remove your own relational influence. Just as a freebie thrown in here, if you don't have a weekly one-on-one time with your kid already, start doing that. Do something that they would want to do, pay for it yourself, and make a habit of it. I don't really care if there's no talking the entire time that you're doing it. Just spend that time with your kid, and at the risk of making this too long, give them a couple of options that you know that they would enjoy. If they say they don't want to do that, then whatever you were inviting them to do, just do it without them. You can still have a nice evening even if they don't want to be a part of it. And if it's something like ice cream or coffee or something, bring it home. Eat it in front of them. We could do a whole other video just about this. But again, I don't want this to sprawl out of control. The point is this, right? The consequences that you put in place should not be damaging to the relationship. It shouldn't isolate your teen from you or otherwise remove your influence. So that's what I mean when I say that consequences shouldn't actively hinder relationship. Your teen is probably going to resent or push back against any consequence that you use, but the consequence shouldn't take away opportunity for relationship. When you first start implementing consequences for action, what should you expect? Expect the rules to be broken. Your kid is going to walk up to the line, now look at you, look at the line, back at you, just put one toe over the line. just test that boundary. See if it's really there. See if you mean what you say. Let's jump back to the earlier, to I think it was the first video. This is normal teenage behavior. This isn't anything unusual. They're testing the boundaries because they're teenagers. This isn't in itself a bad thing. Don't take it personally. If you suspect that your kid is just testing the boundaries to see if they're really there, just ask them flat out. So should we do the consequence now, or just call this a warning and it won't happen again? They want independence, and realistically they need independence, but they also want and need boundaries. Boundaries keep us safe. They help us feel secure. What's going on in your family is a small picture of their relationship with the world. They want to know the boundaries, and they want the boundaries to be clear. But remember, as they continue to grow and mature, you should keep the boundaries somewhat dynamic as well. Sit down with your teen every few months. Talk about the rules and the consequences. Talk with them about what makes sense, what works, what hasn't been working. Get their honest feedback, and be willing to change these boundaries as circumstances evolve, as you trust your teen more, as they get their own vehicle, as they start working at a job. Relationships are dynamic, and your rules should reflect that. When your teen is pushing the boundaries, that's a normal teenage response to growing up and growing into an adult. Let's recap one last time. First, rules without relationship breeds rebellion. Rules should create an environment in which relationships can occur, grow, and thrive. No rule should exist for the sake of the rule, but should exist to foster relationship. And this can be broken down into the concepts of safety and security, respect and consideration for others, health and well-being, and promoting future relational success. Second, consequences need to not hinder relationship, right? They should be putting the pain back on the kid. They need to be swift enough that you create a mental link between the infraction and the consequence. They need to be short-term so that your teen has a chance to succeed or fail again and learn from their mistakes, and they need to be strong enough to get your teen's attention. Third, it is natural for teens to push back against the boundaries set in place for them by their parents and by society at large. They're trying to understand the world and exercise control in it. Your teen pushing the boundaries, it's not about you, it's about them. Don't take it personally. None of these things are easy. There will be pain involved. Remember that in all of this, your ultimate goal is to prepare them for the world and to ensure that your relationship is strong enough that they turn to you for advice, even once they are out from under your direct authority. Well, that's it. I'd like to say that we're capping it off here because that's all we have to say on the subject, but it's really not. There's so much more that could be said, so much that we could continue to share, but I think that covers a lot of the bare bones, the bare basics here. If you found this video series helpful, consider sharing it with others who may need it or even just find it interesting. Share it with your friends, your family, members of the clergy, whoever. And if you have any questions or would like to see more material like this in the future from Rock Solid Refuge, let us know by emailing partners@rocksolidrefuge.com. And I would be remiss not to add that all of this is only possible because of our incredible donors. If you want to see more content like this, you could also consider making a gift at rocksolidrefuge.com. One final thought, one last thing to leave you with, parting words of wisdom, if you will. Let's cap off the video series as we began this video itself. Rules without relationship breeds rebellion. In crisis, start here.